Hello everyone, my name is Linda Tshabalala and I play the alto saxophone. I'd like to thank the Saxophone Symposium for the invitation for me to speak on a topic that's very close to my heart, as I am a horn player myself and a woman at the same time. The journey of women in this country, not only in the music but as instrumentalists, is one that is, for lack of a better description, a sad one. It lacks of support for women, but also maybe I would not also blame the system, the music industry system, because we've never had the insurgence of women musicians as we do right now. And also, I mean, it goes with history that back in the day, women would be found in the kitchen, women would be found at home, nursing children or bringing up children, and would be stay-at-home moms more than they would be out there chasing their dreams or their desires or whatever they wish to acquire in life or to be. So as such, the journey, when we look back, women in music in jazz, or women who are instrumentalists, it's very hard to find any. When I think back to probably the first woman I know who played a horn is the one that I met when I started out on my journey, on my music journey, at the Music Academy of Gauteng with Dr Johnny Mekoa, and I met there Nthabiseng Mokoena after I'd seen her perform. Before I had joined the school, it was Nthabiseng Mokoena, and then there was also a trombone player, Mokoena. Those were the first women I'd ever seen playing saxophone, playing trombone, respectively. And then after that, I remember seeing a picture of, I think it's the jazz pioneers, African jazz pioneers, where they had featured a female saxophonist or a woman saxophonist. I can't remember the mama's name, but I know she recently passed, and she's the only one whose picture I ever had in my mind of a woman who ever played a horn. And it was an important event in my life when I saw such images, because they stayed with me, and they probably one of the biggest contributions to me being a horn player. And I'd like to think for other women as well who are out there playing horn, they might have similar stories as well that led to them playing horns instead of being a singer or being a dancer or being, a backing vocalist, or being traditionally what women would be found doing in music. And as such, I believe that in order for us to be able to reach a level of inclusive creativity, we have to get to a point where we support musicians, we support saxophonists or horn players, whether be they men or women. If we don't do that, then we are never going to get to a point where everybody contributes, and as such you find that the industry, the music, grows to a level that nobody can imagine, and we get to a level of excellence that can stand against any other country in the world or against any other universe in the world, So in order for the next level of musicianship, or the next level of creativity, or the next level of anything in any industry, women have to be included. It has to be an inclusive society. And once we get to that part where we become an inclusive society, then we become inclusive in all aspects of our lives, such as music, such as creativity, such as the entertainment or the arts. And I speak not only to the community of horn players or saxophonists or musicians out there, but I speak to everybody, even ourselves, individually, as people, as musicians, that we need to understand that the platform comes with responsibility. The platform comes with understanding that you have this calling for a reason, and you need to use it responsibly. And also to the community at large, that we need to support, we need to encourage, we need to be there. And because we know that we've been through such and such, let's minimize it for the next generation or the next generations, as much as possible, so that they get the information much quicker, they get the information much more diluted, and they can understand it much more clearer than we did. And and we shall go from that point, I believe. Thank you.
Greetings, everyone. My name is Simon Yvana, and I'm a saxophonist. Thank you for tuning into the South African Perspective video, where I'll be sharing my perspective on the South African jazz saxophone. So to just kick it off, I'd love to just say a shout out to our South African jazz saxophone heroes, the likes of Mokoena, Mokoena, Moses Kumalo, the list goes on and on, but just to name a few. So my perspective on South African jazz saxophone and what shapes the sound of the SA jazz saxophone. I personally think the traditional ways of hearing music, the background of hearing music, and just the cultural way, and the lifestyle influences our way of playing and our style of playing. So back then, judging from, just to have a comparison from the old times and the modern times, back then it was very much clear, how our saxophonists, our elders, projected the sound, and it was very clear that it was a sound that that resembled or expressed their traditional background, or just their background, not even traditional, but the background where they come from. For me personally, I think, and I've been also influenced by this. I've been influenced by vocals, South African, our mothers, our mothers singing, our mothers' grandmas and people from church, and traditional ceremonies and everything. So I think that sound is very much embedded in our DNA, and to some extent it comes out naturally out of our saxophone, so to just to separate the two, it's not separate, but the old times and modern times. The old times are influencing our modern sound. I still have, from my perspective, I am very much influenced by the old way of playing, and which is also kind of expressing where I'm coming from, like my family and my tradition. So part of what influences our sound and what makes it unique is that it's the way of how we heard music growing up. So not only just that, but because back then our elders were very much self-taught, mostly were very much self-taught. But because now times have changed and we have access to a lot of information, now we get to exchange from information from international countries, and we just consume information every day, new information every day. So we learn every day. So I think the technical side of the saxophone was also contributing to the style of playing. So now we get to dive deep and get lessons, and focus. I mean, on the technical side of the saxophone, and we get exposed to like different types of music, classical music, jazz, classical music, house music, every type of music, and that heavily influences our sound. So I think also just South African jazz saxophone has not changed in a bad way, but in a good way, and it keeps developing. And I'm pretty much excited to see the future, how the future looks like in a decade or 2 decades or 100 years to come. So that's my perspective on the South African jazz saxophone. Thank you.
Good day. My name is Jazz Mokoena. I'm a female saxophone player. Today I'll be talking about basically the perspective on, South African jazz musician as, you know, as Zakes Nkosi and Mankunku Ngozi. What I can talk about is that basically both musicians had their style of playing, and in terms of you know a saxophone, and Zakes and Ghost was basically they are the ones who him and Elijah created the cornerstone of Mbaqanga, the style music, and and he worked basically at the EMI, writing music, and also, I think he was born in 1919, in Alexandra, and I grew up basically listening to him. The music I was introduced, his music, and I'll play one of the basically his songs, so you can see basically the different, or the stylistic, different style of what between the Manguku and Zakes Nkosi, you know. Okay, one of his songs, it's Mbabane, I hope I'm pronouncing this right. Um, uh, Let me go. That was one of his songs, Umpaqanga. And when it comes to Umankunku, I believe Mankunku was more influenced by American, music, as much as he did, write, African, in an African style, jazz wise. Um, uh, and basically the style he did, you know, especially when it comes to his album called, um, the title of the album, it was, I think it was called Yakalinkomo. Basically, it was on his debut album. Let me also play that, and also he was, it was, I guess, some of the musicians were, it was hard for them in, apartheid era, and the only thing I think they could cope about it was, music, creating music, and and some left to go to exile, and Mangunku was, he stayed behind basically, and let me play one of his songs. Ngozi. And as a musician, a young female musician, listening to all these great, saxophone players, I guess, you kind of like adopt the style of how they play. And this is basically my composition, Um, it calls Unfinished.
I'm Tshepo Tsotetsi. I'm a wind player, producer as well, multi-instrumentalist. But today we are going to talk about the saxophone and its heritage in South Africa. So I want to give you a quick idea of who I am and what I do, where I come from. So I'm from the East Rand. I'm from Crystal Park in Benoni, and I grew up from the system of the brass band, and so I used to be a trumpeter, alto horn player, euphonium player, and eventually we saw some guys playing clarinet and I liked it. And eventually I started taking clarinet lessons for a couple of years, and it was until grade 11 in high school that I started playing saxophone. And it was cool. It was a different color. The instrument was bigger, but I mean, the stereotypes about saxophone. It was an attractive instrument to play anyway, so I started playing the saxophone, and immediately I was confronted with the choices that I had to make as far as what I wanted to sound like, because I didn't have it wasn't a difficult instrument for me to learn, especially because I was a clarinetist anyway. So I had to figure out a way to think about the saxophone in a way that was going to be practical for me, coming from a classical background, a church background, and yeah, then I started looking into saxophone players, which is the first thing anyone would do. The obvious choices were your typical choices: Charlie Parker, John Coltrane. That's what everyone spoke about. But I knew that for me to really get into the space that I wanted to get into, as far as my playing, how I wanted to express myself, and also what I was hearing in my head, I needed to widen the pool of what I was looking for. And fortunately, I was at the National School of the Arts at the time. A friend of mine wanted us to go check out a CD store very close to Carlton Center. Baraki Koino. Koino was a seriously equipped jazz store that you could find CDs, records even, and the staff pretty much knew a lot about jazz in general. Mind you, I was not a jazz player or anything like that, but I wanted to find out if I could dig up some recordings, some recordings about big bands and saxophonists in South Africa, composers in South Africa, and also just pretty much have a nice CD collection of South African music. And I went there and I picked up a couple of CDs, which at the time were very reasonably priced for a high school student, considering that I didn't have a lot of money on me all the time. But with the money I could save, maybe ke shotise a taxi mole le mole, and I could save money, and I bought a considerable amount of CDs, and some of the main people that I remember ke Dudu Pukwane, Kaya Mahlangu for sure. I mean, it's surprising that it's so far, so long ago, but Mthunzi Mvubu also was someone who influenced my saxophone perception quite a bit, because I mean, I got to see him play from when he was pretty young as well, and I mean, at the time, that's what he played. I was dabbling around with a lot of instruments, but it was interesting that I could see someone grow in so many ways. And I remember at the time, Oscar Chabane was pretty much launched as a wonder child of the saxophone. So I remember the first time I saw him play Nikki's. I was blown away, obviously, because I mean he's just amazing. But the one thing I was conflicted about now was style, because I mean, he was advanced. He was very advanced. But I wanted to see, is this what I want to do, or am I simply going to go into it blindly? Because, I mean, he was very skilled, but it wasn't quite what I wanted to sound like, you know. So I was a bit conflicted in that sense. So there were a lot of new age players, and I remember meeting Ntate Kaya Mahlangu, and he opened my mind wide open, especially because of the dilemmas I had with the saxophone, and he gave me a very good place to be in, as far as finding my own way of playing, of thinking about it, of foreseeing what I want to sound like in the near future, in the next 5 years or whatever. I think our heritage of the saxophone sound is something to be very proud of. It's something we can do very well, and it's something that we can definitely also document very well. As much as we have CDs and records from yesteryears, I think it's something that we should document more, talk about more, also have on paper, have a methodology about it, because it's something that's very beautiful. The expression is very exciting, and I feel that we need to immortalize this thing, because it's something that really, really, really can make music easier for the generations that come even after us. So we have a very rich history of saxophone playing, a very delicate heritage of saxophone playing, one that really should be explored even further, but one that is already, I mean, where they put it for us was at a very good point. Where they put it for us was at a very good point, and I'm grateful that I was able to learn from those that are still alive, that possess the strongest features of that style. I'm Tshepo Tsotetsi, and I'm a saxophone player as well. I do hope you enjoy your time with the saxophone and keep playing.